or speaking to those who were close to her. The kind-hearted Mrs. Weston left her seat to join him and say, "Do not you dance, Mr. Elton?" To which his prompt reply was, "Most readily, Mrs. Weston, if you will dance with me." "Me? Oh, no," she cried. "I would get you a better partner than myself. I am no dancer. There is a young lady disengaged whom I should be very glad to see dancing. Miss Smith?" "Miss Smith? I'd not observed," said he. "You're extremely obliging, and if I were not an old married man... You'll excuse me, Mrs. Weston. Anything else I should be most happy to do at your command. But, my dancing days are over." Mrs. Weston said no more. Emma could imagine with what surprise and mortification she must be returning to her seat, as smiles of high glee passed between Mr. Elton and his wife. In another moment, a happier sight caught her. Mr. Knightley leading Harriet to the set. Never had she been more surprised, seldom more delighted than at that instant. His dancing proved to be extremely good, and Harriet's happy features announced her very complete enjoyment and high sense of distinction. Supper was announced. The move began, and Miss Bates might be heard from that moment without interruption till being seated at table and taking up her spoon. "Jane, my dear Jane, Mrs. Weston begs you to put on your tippet. Mr. Churchill, oh, you're too obliging. How well you put it on. Well, where shall we sit? Anywhere so that Jane is not in a draught. Where I sit is no consequence. Soup, too, bless me. I should not be helped so soon, but it smells so excellent, and I cannot help beginning." Emma had no opportunity of speaking to Mr. Knightley till after supper. But when they were all in the ballroom again, he was warm in his reprobation of Mr. Elton's conduct. It had been unpardonable rudeness, and Mrs. Elton's looks also received the due share of censure. "They aimed at wounding more than Harriet," said he. He looked with smiling penetration and added, "She ought not to be angry with you, I suspect, whatever he may be. To that surmise you say nothing, of course. But confess, Emma, that you did want him to marry Harriet." "I did," replied Emma, "and they cannot forgive me." He shook his head, but there was a smile of indulgence with it, and he only said, "I shall not scold you. I leave you to your own reflections. I do own myself to have been completely mistaken in Mr. Elton. There's a littleness about him which you discovered and which I did not. And I was fully convinced of his being in love with Harriet. It was through a series of strange blunders. They were interrupted by the bustle of Mr. Weston calling on everybody to begin dancing again. "Come, Emma, set your companions the example." "Whom are you going to dance with?" asked Mr. Knightley. "With you, if you will ask me." The next morning, Emma walked about the lawn, enjoying agreeable recollections of the ball. She was just turning to the house, with spirits freshened up, when the great iron sweep gate opened, and two persons entered whom she had nevertheless expected to see together. Frank Churchill, with Harriet leaning on his arm. A moment sufficed to convince her that something extraordinary had happened. Harriet looked white and frightened, and he was trying to cheer her. They were all three soon in the hall, and Harriet immediately sank into a chair and fainted away. A few minutes made Emma acquainted with the whole. Miss Smith and Miss Bickerton, another parlour boarder at Mrs. Goddard's, had walked out together and taken a road which, though apparently public enough for safety, had led them into alarm. About half a mile beyond Highbury, they had suddenly perceived, at a small distance before them, a party of gipsies. A child came towards them to beg, and Miss Bickerton, excessively frightened, gave a great scream, ran up a steep bank, cleared a slight hedge at the top, and made the best of her way by a short-cut back to Highbury. But poor Harriet had suffered very much from cramp after dancing, and her first attempt to mount the bank brought on such a return of it as made her absolutely powerless. Harriet was soon assailed by half a dozen children, headed by a stout woman and a great boy. More and more frightened, she immediately promised them money, and taking out her purse, gave them a shilling, and begged them not to want more, or to use her ill. Her terror and her purse were too tempting, and she was surrounded by the whole gang, demanding more. In this state, Frank Churchill had found her. By a most fortunate chance, his leaving Highbury had been delayed so as to bring him to her assistance at this critical moment. Happening to have borrowed a pair of scissors the night before of Miss Bates, and to have forgotten to restore them, he had been obliged to stop at her door and go in for a few minutes. He was therefore later than he had intended. The terror which the woman and boy had been creating in Harriet was then their own portion. He had left them completely frightened, and Harriet eagerly clinging to him, hardly able to speak. This was the amount of the whole story. He dared not stay longer than to see her well. These several delays left him not another minute to lose, and Emma engaging to give assurance of Harriet's safety to Mrs. Goddard, he set off with all the grateful blessings that she could utter for her friend and herself. Such an adventure as this! A fine young man and a lovely young woman, thrown together in such a way, could hardly fail of suggesting certain ideas to the coldest heart and the steadiest brain. So Emma thought, at least. It was a very extraordinary thing. Nothing of the sort had ever occurred before to any young ladies in the place, within her memory. No rencontre, no alarm of the kind. And now it had happened to the very person, at the very hour, when the other very person was chancing to pass by to rescue her. It certainly was very extraordinary. It seemed as if everything united to promise the most interesting consequences. Everything was to take its natural course, however, neither impelled nor assisted. She would not stir a step, nor drop a hint. No, she had had enough of interference. There could be no harm in a scheme, a mere passive scheme. It was no more than a wish. Beyond it, she would on no account proceed.
Eve Best was reading from Emma by Jane Austen. It's abridged by Sarah Davis and produced in Bristol by Mary Ward Lowry. Catherine Bohart and Sarah Keyworth are comedians and a real-life couple. After the news, they'll discuss finding confidence and couples therapy.
The Rethink podcast from BBC Radio 4, 5 Live and BBC World Service.
Has your perspective shifted?
That is what a post-lockdown relationship should look like.
We can change the world for the better.
Rethinking the future in response to the coronavirus.
Every crisis contains both danger and opportunity.
Rethink. 3-minute essays from leading figures, including Pope Francis, Tim Berners-Lee, Lady Hale and Andy Murray. The Rethink podcast, available now on BBC Sounds.
BBC News at 11 o'clock. Boris Johnson has announced a further easing of restrictions in England, declaring the national hibernation is beginning to end. From the 4th of July, people will be allowed to go to restaurants and pubs, have a haircut and stay overnight with family and friends. The 2-metre rule will be relaxed, but he warned all the steps were reversible. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, said he broadly supported the government's decision.
We will, of course, scrutinise the details of this announcement. We will study the guidance, and there are obviously a number of questions that need to be answered. But overall, I welcome this statement. I believe the government is trying to do the right thing, and in that, we will support them.
The 2-metre rule remains in force in Scotland, Northern Ireland and Wales, and people are still being told not to travel more than 5 miles from their homes in Scotland and Wales. The top US health official for infectious diseases, Anthony Fauci, has warned some parts of the country are seeing a disturbing surge in coronavirus cases. Dr. Fauci told a congressional hearing that a rigorous and effective testing regime was vital to tackle the disease, and the coming days would be crucial if the authorities were going to get on top of rising numbers of infections.
Right now, the next couple of weeks are going to be critical in our ability to address those surgings that we're seeing in Florida in Texas, in Arizona, and in other states. They're not the only ones that are having a difficulty. Bottom line, Mr. Chairman, it's a mixed bag. Some good and some now we have a problem with.
Twitter has added a warning label to another tweet by Donald Trump. The president had written that the establishment of an autonomous zone by anti-racism protesters in Washington, D.C. would be met with serious force. Twitter said the post violated its rules on abusive behaviour. Police have concluded that no crime was committed when a banner with the message "White Lives Matter" was flown over the Etihad football stadium in Manchester last night. The incident happened after all players had taken the knee in support of the Black Lives Matter movement. The Professional Art Restorers Association in Spain has called for regulation of the craft after a botched cleaning of a Baroque painting transformed the Virgin Mary into something resembling a primary school artwork. The copy of Murillo's Immaculate Conception was retouched by a furniture restorer. Mike Sanders takes up the story.
Only a copy it may have been, but the owner in the eastern city of Valencia rused the day he entrusted it to a family friend. The first attempt to disguise the damage left Christ's mother looking like a sulky teenager, with a second go flattening the face entirely. ACRE, the Restorers Association, said the lack of regulation exposed Spain's heritage to vandalism by the unskilled. A similar botched job on a fresco of Jesus 8 years ago in Borja in Catalonia morphed him from a man to a monkey. But that misguided effort by an elderly churchgoer is now a tourist attraction.
BBC News.
Wimbledon on the BBC.
Having had 7 championship points, Borg now has 2 more.
Famous old centre court could be about to go crazy. Murray serves.
Returns on the backhand.
Up goes the lob. Brilliant on the volley.
Forehand down the line.
Wraps underneath it for the smash.
Back and return. Oh, it's just extraordinary from Novak Djokovic.
Jana Novotna slumps to her knees.
Serena Williams collapses on her back.
Pete Sampras has written himself into the Wimbledon history book.
Rewind to some of the best matches from the Wimbledon Championship. Starts next Monday at 1:30 on BBC Two and iPlayer.
Now on Radio 4, comedians and couple Catherine Bohart and Sarah Keyworth are joined by Jade Adams and Rich Wilson to talk about finding confidence and couples counselling. This is You'll Do.
Hello, I'm Catherine Bohart.
And I'm Sarah Keyworth.
We are a couple together and comedians separately, and this is You'll Do, a podcast in which we unpack the overwrought notion of couples goals and take a look at what putting up with each other actually means. Which reminds me, there'll be some rude words and probably some adult themes. This is less about vacation shots and engagement announcements and much, much more about having to wash each other's pubes out of the bath.
Exactly. We want to talk about pubes.
Well, not just pubes, obviously.
But not pubes.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose so. In essence, you're listening to a show by two people who love each other, but in no way expect or believe that that love should or could be perfect. And why? Why, when you shave your pubes in the bath, can't you just rinse them out after?
Yes, it's a mystery.
That is not a mystery.
Ooh.
It's not a mystery. You leave them there.
Who did it?
It was you.
Who's the culprit?
You shaved them, and then you, I guess, sat there in your pube water, and then you left
shavers
them to just drain.
Ooh.
It's not a mystery.
Tune in next week as we discover a new lead in the mystery of who shaved their pubes.
Today, our guests are comedian, songstress, and TV host Jade Adams and comedian and podcaster extraordinaire Rich Wilson.
Yeah.
Perfect. Hello, guys.
Lovely.
Hi, how are you? You could talk now. You're alive. Welcome.
You were like, don't talk over each other, and so we both went. We're great.
We are great.
We are great.
And why are we great today?
Because we've had therapy today.
Yeah.
Yes, it's straight in with the big stuff. Amazing. Do you do that often?
Yeah, every 2 weeks.
Every 2 weeks we're going to have couples counselling.
Right. Every 2 weeks. For how long have you been doing that?
Since last year, November.
Yeah,
That's amazing.
I mean, I feel like you're not going to need this, but usually what we do to sort of get people in the mood to talk about and share things is Catherine and I will share 3 things that each of us have made us feel during the week.
Okay, this week you made me feel bored, truly mind-numbingly bored, when you told me about the life and death of each of your horses in a computer game I don't play and don't care about. That was an hour I'll never get back.
I felt like you cared at the time.
Well, sure, because I was trying to care, but by the second Ronin, they're all called Ronin.
They're all called Ronin.
Ronin 2 was when I was like, I'm out.
Ronin. R.I.P. Ronin.
I can't do this again.
Okay, well, I was living with you 2 days ago because I found out you spent, you spent £8 on 20 bin bags. And I've never been more angry about anything.
They get them free.
How good are they? How good are they? Can you tell me exactly?
They're actually incredible, Jay.
Tell me why, because tell me.
First of all, we have a tiny bin that hangs on the door that goes under our sink. It fits perfectly in this nook, and they are these bin bags that are both thick enough for them never to break, so you don't get any leakage, right? But also fit the bin perfectly.
Every bag will fit in that bin.
It's like having a fitted sheet for your bin.
Oh my God!
Oh,
it's not worth it. I could come.
No.
And Jade, get this drawstring, so when you take it out,
you don't have to touch the.
Oh, exactly. Thank you. I feel seen.
I reckon we could get them cheaper though. I don't think we could.
Yeah.
Do your research, Sarah. Go onto Amazon.
Also, I took it out of the joint account, so I only spent £4. You spent £4, and I spent £4.
I don't want to spend £4 on bin bags. I think £4.
Why that? Because you use them.
Well, I have to use them. Oh, what am I doing? Not use them. They're the most expensive things I own.
Okay, you made me incredibly frustrated this week because we've just moved house and you said you were going to sort out the bills. And did you sort out the bills? No. And I did all the things that I said I would do for the house, and then I had to do the things you said you'd do for the house.
I did some of them.
That's right, you did the easy ones and then said I'm busy as if I was not busy.
I'm sorry.
That was the thing.
I love your dynamic. It's so similar.
Is it? Which of you does more of the domestic? Oh, Rich, really?
I am absolutely not interested in being tidy.
Rich, do you love to clean?
I don't love to clean. I just do it because otherwise we'd be living in a bin. And I might have to get some of those expensive bags.
Yeah, that'd be lovely, wouldn't it?
I will say, on my defence, what I am fantastic at is no one, not even you, cleans like I do when I do it. I am thorough. If you're going to clean the floor, clean the corners.
How regularly do you do it?
Every 4 years.